The wind had been dragging dust across the road all morning, a low, restless whisper that never quite stopped. It moved in thin veils over the hard-packed earth, lifting and settling as if the land itself were breathing slow and tired. By noon, the town of Red Hollow looked half buried in it. A man rode in from the west. He came without hurry, his horse stepping careful and measured, each hoof landing like it had something to think about first. The rider sat straight but loose in the saddle, one hand resting near the horn, the other hanging low. His coat had seen better winters, and his hat had been shaped by more than weather. Dust clung to him the way it did to everything else. Out here without asking. Folks noticed. They always did. A pair of men leaning outside the saloon stopped their talk mid-sentence. A woman drawing water from the pump turned just enough to watch without making it plain. Even the boy sitting on the edge of the boardwalk paused his stick drawing in the dirt. The rider didn't look at any of them. He guided the horse to the hitching post and stepped down slow, joints stiff, but practiced. He tied the reins with a neat, familiar knot. Then he stood there for a moment, one hand resting on the horse's neck, eyes lowered. "You done carried me far enough," he murmured. The horse flicked an ear. He turned toward the saloon. Inside, the air was thick with stale beer and smoke, the sound of low voices grinding together like stones. A piano sat silent in the corner, keys yellowed, lid half open like a mouth that had forgotten what to say. The man walked to the bar. "Whiskey," he said. The barkeep looked him over slow, deliberate. "Coin first." The rider reached into his coat, set down to worn coins. They clinked louder than they should have. The barkeep poured. The man took the glass, held it for a moment, then drank. No flinch, no hurry. Just the quiet acceptance of something that burned. "Name?" the barkeep asked. The man set the glass down. "Don't matter, it does here." A pause. Elias Crow. The name settled into the room. It didn't ripple, didn't stir anything immediate, but it didn't vanish either. It just stayed there, like something waiting. "Well, Mr. Crow," the barkeep said, "you passing through or planting yourself?" Elias didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the far end of the room. There, near the back wall, a girl sat alone at a table. She couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9. Her dress was too thin for the dust that came through the cracks in the walls, and her shoes were scuffed down to something that barely held together. She had her hands folded in her lap, tight enough that her knuckles showed pale. She wasn't drinking, wasn't eating, just sitting, waiting. Elias turned back to the bar. "Passing," he said, but his voice had changed. Just a little. By late afternoon, the town had grown louder. Wagons creaked in, men argued over cattle prices, and somewhere down the road a hammer struck wood in steady, tired rhythm. The dust hadn't stopped, but it felt thinner now, stretched out under the weight of the heat. Elias stood outside the general store, watching a small crowd gather near the center of town. A raised platform had been set up. Auction, he didn't need to ask what kind. 2 men stood on either side of the platform, broad, clean shirts. Boots polished just enough to show they cared about appearances. One of them wore a star pinned to his chest, sheriff, or something close enough to claim it. Between them stood the girl, the same one from the saloon. Her hands were still clasped, but now they trembled. Not much, just enough to notice if you were looking. Elias watched. A man in a vest stepped forward, smiling like this was a fine afternoon for business. "Now then," he called out, voice carrying across the square. "We got ourselves a situation here. No kin to speak of, no papers, no proper claim. Can't have strays running loose, now can we?" A few men chuckled. "So," the man went on, "we're going to settle it the proper way. Bidding starts at $5. The girl's eyes moved across the crowd, not landing anywhere for long. Searching, maybe. Or just trying not to stay still. 5. Someone called 6-8. The numbers rose, slow at first, then quicker. Elias didn't move. His jaw tightened just a fraction. $10, said a man near the front, big, red-faced, with hands like tools. The man in the vest grinned. 10 I got? Do I hear 15? The voice came from the edge of the crowd. Heads turned. Elias stood there, hat low, hands at his sides. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "You new here?" Elias didn't answer. 15, the auctioneer repeated. "Do I hear 20? A silence stretched. The red-faced man spat into the dust. "Ain't worth that." "No, sir," the auctioneer said, "but she's what's available." No one spoke. 15 going once. The girl looked at Elias now. Really looked, not hope, not yet. Just something quieter, something that didn't dare name itself. Going twice. 20. The sheriff stepped forward. The crowd shifted, murmuring. The auctioneer's grin sharpened. $20, he said. Now that's a serious 30. Elias again. The sheriff's expression hardened. You trying to make a point? Elias met his gaze. No, a pause. 40, the sheriff said. The number hung there, heavy. Elias didn't blink. 50. The crowd went still. The auctioneer laughed, a short, nervous sound. Well now, gentlemen, this is 60, the sheriff cut in. Elias reached into his coat. He pulled out a small leather pouch, loosened the tie, and poured the contents into his palm. Coins. Not many, but enough. He stepped forward, onto the edge of the platform. 70, he said. The sheriff stared at him. There was something in that look, now not just irritation, recognition maybe, or the beginning of it. 70, the auctioneer repeated softly. No one else spoke. The sheriff glanced at the coins in Elias's hand, then at the man himself. You sure you know what you're buying? He asked. Elias didn't look at the girl. I know what I'm paying. A long moment passed. Then the sheriff stepped back. The auctioneer cleared his throat. $70. Going once, going twice. Sold. The sound of the gavel hitting wood echoed sharp and final. The girl didn't move. Neither did Elias, not for a while. He didn't take her far. Just to the edge of town, where the buildings thinned and the land opened into dry, endless stretch. There was a small stable there, half collapsed but still standing, and he led his horse inside. The girl followed, a few steps behind. He untied a bedroll from the saddle, laid it out on the ground. You can sit, he said. She didn't. He nodded once, like that was answer enough, and began to check the horse's hooves. What's your name? He asked. Silence. He worked a bit longer. Then, quietly, you ain't got to talk. Just makes things easier if you do. A long pause. Lila, her voice was thin, like it hadn't been used much. Elias nodded. Lila, he finished with the horse, stood up, brushed the dust from his hands. You hungry? She hesitated, then nodded. He reached into his pack, pulled out a piece of dried meat and a small tin of biscuits. He handed them to her. She took them carefully, like they might be taken back. Eat, he said. She sat then, slow, and began to eat in small, careful bites. Elias stepped outside. The sun was lowering, casting long shadows across the land. The town behind him hummed with evening noise laughter, shouting the clink of glasses. He leaned against the stable wall. For a moment, he closed his eyes. And in that quiet, something old stirred. A memory. A girl, years ago, standing in a doorway, different face, same look. Waiting for someone to do something. He opened his eyes. The wind picked up again, carrying dust across the ground. Behind him, inside the stable, Lila coughed softly. Elias straightened. Stay here, he said without turning. Then he walked back toward town. The saloon was louder now, filled with men who had spent the day working and the evening forgetting. The sheriff sat at a table near the back, a glass in his hand, 2 men beside him. Elias walked straight to him. We need to talk, he said. The sheriff looked up, slow, deliberate. I was wondering when you'd come back. Elias stood there, unmoving. The men at the table shifted, hands near their belts. You overpaid, the sheriff said. Bad habit. Elias didn't respond. Thing is, the sheriff went on, you bought trouble. That girl, she ain't just some stray. Elias's eyes narrowed. Then what is she? The sheriff leaned back, smiling without warmth. She's leverage. A pause. For who? For a man who ain't dead yet, the sheriff said. And men like him, they tend to come looking. Elias let that sit. Then he'll come, he said. The sheriff studied him. You don't scare easy, do you? No. The sheriff nodded slowly. That's going to get you killed, maybe. Silence stretched between them. Then Elias spoke again. You're done with her. It wasn't a question. The sheriff's smile faded. You don't tell me what I'm done with. Elias leaned in, just a fraction. I paid, he said. The words were quiet, flat. The sheriff held his gaze. Then, after a moment, he shrugged. Fine, she's yours. Elias straightened. But, the sheriff added, When her father comes, don't say, "I didn't warn you." Elias turned to leave. "Crow," the sheriff called after him. Elias stopped, but didn't turn. "I know that name," the sheriff said. "Took me a while, but I know it. A beat. You should have stayed gone." Elias didn't respond. He stepped out into the night. The attack came before dawn. Elias heard it first, the faint crunch of boots on dry earth, the shift of weight that didn't belong to the wind. He was awake before the second step. He rose from the ground in one smooth motion, hand already on his gun. "Stay down," he whispered. Lila didn't move. She was already awake, eyes wide in the dark. The stable door creaked. A shadow slipped through. Then another. Elias fired. The first man dropped before he could speak. The second fired back, the shot tearing through the wood beside Elias's head. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. Elias moved low, fast, his boots barely making sound. Another shot, a grunt. Silence. Then Elias Crow. The voice came from outside, calm, familiar in a way that made something tighten in Elias's chest. "You always did like getting in the middle of things that ain't yours." Elias stepped into the doorway, gun raised. A man stood in the pale light of early morning. Older now, harder, but the face was the same. "Caleb," Elias said. Caleb smiled, slow and thin. Been a long time. Elias's grip tightened. Behind him, inside the stable, Lila watched, and in her eyes now there was something new. Recognition. Not of Elias, of the man outside. "Papa," she whispered. The word landed like a stone. Caleb's smile widened. There she is. Elias didn't lower his gun. Caleb took a step forward. "You bought yourself a piece of my life, Crow, that wasn't yours to take." Elias's voice was steady. "She ain't a thing to be bought." Caleb laughed softly. "Everything is." A pause. "Step aside." Elias didn't move. No. The word hung there, simple and final. Caleb's eyes darkened. "You don't get to play savior. Not after what you did." Elias said nothing. The past sat between them, heavy and unspoken. Then Caleb drew. The shot cracked through the morning. Elias fired back, and the world narrowed to sound and dust and the sharp, burning edge of everything that couldn't be undone. When it was over, the sun had just begun to rise. The light fell soft over the ground, over the still bodies, over the man lying on his back with his eyes open and empty. Caleb stared at the sky. Elias stood over him, breathing slow, steady, though his hands trembled just a little. Behind him, Lila stepped out of the stable. She looked at her father, then at Elias. She didn't cry. Not yet. Elias lowered his gun. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lila walked past him. Knelt beside Caleb, she reached out, touched his sleeve. "Papa?" No answer. Life. The wind moved through the open land, soft and restless. Elias turned. Away he didn't watch. Some things weren't his to see. After a while he heard her stand, felt her presence beside him. "Where do we go?" she asked. Elias looked out at the horizon. The road stretched long and empty. "I don't know," he said. It was the truth. She slipped her hand into his, small, warm, certain. He looked down at it, then back at the road. After a moment, he nodded. "Guess we'll find out." They started walking. Behind them, Red Hollow lay quiet under the morning light. Ahead, the land opened wide, and the wind kept moving, carrying dust across the earth like it always had, like it always would,